they were not all great men. Some were cunning politicians, others brutal tyrants, and a few, true giants who bent the fate of Rome with their will. The title Caesar did not guarantee strength. In fact, many who wore the crown crumbled under its weight, but a handful rose above all others, leaving scars and legacies that shaped empires for centuries. Tonight, we will strip away the myths, break past the marble statues, and rank the strongest Caesars in Roman history. Men whose power was measured not just in armies, but in the iron grip they held over destiny itself. Julius Caesar's rise to power was not inevitable, but it was unstoppable once he began his march. Born into a patrician family that had influence but little wealth, Caesar relied on his sharp mind, bold ambition, and unmatched charisma to carve his path. He was not simply a general, he was a master of persuasion, a skilled speaker, and a man who understood that image and perception mattered as much as military victories. From his earliest years, he cultivated alliances, often using charm and calculated loyalty to position himself in Rome's ruthless political landscape. By securing the support of the masses through grand public games and by forging bonds with powerful men like Pompey and Crassus in the first triumvirate, he gained a platform no ordinary politician could dream of. His true test came in Gaul. For nearly a decade, Caesar commanded legions that fought through brutal campaigns, facing tribes who often outnumbered them. Yet his tactical genius shone again and again. At battles like Alesia, he not only outmaneuvered his enemies but reshaped the art of warfare itself, building fortifications and using siege tactics with precision. The victories brought immense wealth and glory, not just for Caesar but for Rome, and his soldiers adored him for it. To them, he was not a distant commander, but one who shared their hardships, marched alongside them, and rewarded their loyalty with both spoils and honor. This bond between Caesar and his legions became his greatest weapon, stronger than any Senate decree. The Senate, however, grew fearful. His successes made him too powerful, his influence too great. When ordered to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, Caesar chose defiance. The crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BCE was more than a military maneuver. It was a declaration that he would not be stripped of what he had earned. "The die is cast," he is said to have declared, and with that act the fate of the Republic was sealed. Civil war followed, and Caesar's brilliance once again decided the outcome. He crushed Pompey, his former ally turned rival, and pursued him to the ends of the Mediterranean until victory was absolute. But Caesar's strength was not confined to battlefields. As dictator, he launched sweeping reforms. He reorganized the calendar into the Julian system, stabilized debts, expanded the Senate, and sought to integrate the provinces more fully into Rome's political fabric. These actions reflected his vision of Rome not as a city-state ruling distant lands, but as a true empire that needed structure and unity. Yet such concentration of power drew enemies. Senators feared he was becoming a king in all but name, a betrayal of Rome's cherished traditions. On the Ides of March in 44 BCE, Caesar was cut down by blades in the Senate. The conspirators believed they were saving the Republic, but instead unleashed another storm of wars. His death proved that his power had grown so immense it could no longer coexist with the old order. In life, Caesar shattered the Republic. In death, he made the empire inevitable. His strength was not just military or political, it was the force of transformation itself. Augustus, born Gaius Octavius, did not inherit his place as the first emperor by sheer luck. He earned it through patience, calculation, and a talent for survival unmatched in Roman history. When Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, Octavian was a young man of only 18, little known beyond his family circle. Yet in Caesar's will, he was named heir, instantly placed at the center of Rome's most dangerous political storm. Many underestimated him, dismissing him as too frail and inexperienced to matter. They were wrong. With calm determination, he maneuvered himself into the chaos, adopting Caesar's name and legacy, rallying loyalists and quietly building alliances that gave him legitimacy. At first, he aligned himself with Mark Antony and Lepidus in the Second Triumvirate, a pact sealed by vengeance for Caesar's murder. Together, they crushed the assassins Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi, avenging Caesar and securing power. But Augustus never intended to share Rome forever. The triumvirate was only a stepping stone. Slowly, methodically, he chipped away at his rivals. Lepidus was sidelined. Antony, entangled with Cleopatra in Egypt, was painted as a traitor to Rome itself. When their conflict erupted into war, Augustus presented himself as the defender of Roman tradition, while Antony became the face of foreign corruption. The decisive clash came at the naval battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Augustus's fleet, commanded by his brilliant general Agrippa, crushed Antony and Cleopatra, forcing them to flee and eventually take their own lives. With their downfall, Augustus stood unchallenged, master of Rome and its provinces. Yet his genius lay not only in defeating enemies, but in how he reshaped victory into lasting power. Unlike Caesar, who flaunted his authority, Augustus cloaked his rule in careful modesty. He took titles like princeps, meaning first citizen, instead of king or dictator. To the Senate, he appeared as a partner, restoring their dignity and appearance, while in truth he controlled every lever of power: armies, finances, and provinces. This careful balancing act allowed him to reign for over 40 years. Under Augustus, the empire stabilized after decades of civil war. He reduced corruption, created permanent institutions like the Praetorian Guard, improved taxation, and launched building projects that transformed Rome into a city of marble. His policies secured loyalty not only from elites but from ordinary Romans, who saw in him the bringer of peace and prosperity. The period known as the Pax Romana began under his rule, a 2-century era of relative peace, made possible because Augustus built a system that did not rely solely on his personality, but on structures that could outlast him. His legacy was not only territorial expansion, though he added Egypt, parts of Spain, and regions along the Danube. His true strength was in founding a model of government that turned a fractured republic into a stable empire. When Augustus died in 14 CE, he left behind more than victories. He left an empire with a political framework so durable it endured for centuries. His strength was not in bold defiance like Caesar, but in patience, discipline, and the ability to disguise absolute power as modest leadership. In mastering survival and shaping the empire's foundation, Augustus proved that strength is not only won on battlefields, it can be built in silence, through control, stability, and time. Trajan's reign marked the pinnacle of Rome's territorial expansion, and his name became synonymous with strength, conquest, and prosperity. Born in Spain, he was the first emperor to come from a province rather than the city of Rome itself, a fact that reflected the empire's widening identity. Rising through the ranks as a soldier and commander, Trajan built his reputation on discipline, loyalty, and a deep understanding of military life. He knew the hardships of the legionary and carried himself as a leader who never forgot the perspective of the men he commanded. This connection to his soldiers became the backbone of his authority. When Trajan became emperor in 98 CE, he inherited a stable empire from Nerva, but he was not content to simply preserve it. He believed Rome's strength rested on expansion, and he launched campaigns that pushed the empire to its greatest territorial extent. His most famous conquest was Dacia, a kingdom rich in gold and fiercely defended by its warrior king Decebalus. The wars were brutal, demanding immense effort and ingenuity, but Trajan's strategy prevailed. He built massive infrastructure to support his campaigns: bridges, roads, and supply lines that allowed his legions to strike deep into enemy territory. The conquest of Dacia not only brought vast wealth into Roman coffers, but also gave Trajan the glory of being one of Rome's greatest conquerors. Victory in Dacia was immortalized in Trajan's Column, a monument that still stands in Rome today, spiraling upward with carvings that depict his campaigns in vivid detail. It was not just a celebration of military might, but a declaration that Trajan had redefined the empire's boundaries and secured its wealth for generations. His ambitions did not stop there. He launched further campaigns into Arabia and Mesopotamia, pressing against the Parthian Empire and momentarily extending Roman influence to the Persian Gulf. Though some of these gains were difficult to hold after his death, they demonstrated Rome's ability to project power across immense distances. Yet Trajan's greatness was not confined to war. He was equally respected as a builder and administrator. He invested the wealth of conquest into Rome itself, commissioning grand public works that improved daily life for citizens. He built new roads, aqueducts, and markets, including the magnificent Trajan's Forum, a complex that stood as both a functional space and a symbol of imperial grandeur. His projects were not empty monuments to ego. They served the people and reinforced the sense that Rome under Trajan was strong, wealthy, and flourishing. Perhaps the clearest sign of his reputation came after his death. The Senate, which had clashed with so many emperors before him, hailed him as Optimus Princeps, the best ruler. Later emperors would be wished to be more fortunate than Augustus and better than Trajan. That phrase alone captures his unique place in Roman memory. Trajan's strength lay in the rare combination of battlefield success, wise governance, and generosity toward his people. He was a conqueror who expanded Rome's horizons, but also a steward who invested in its heart. His reign was a high point that future emperors could only hope to match. Hadrian's rule stands as one of the most distinctive chapters in Roman history, not because of constant conquest, but because of his choice to defend, consolidate, and preserve what others had built. When he became emperor in 117 CE, he inherited from Trajan an empire stretched to its maximum reach, extending deep into Mesopotamia. But Hadrian understood something vital. An empire that grew too large risked collapse from overextension. Instead of seeking new territories, he refocused Rome's energy inward, choosing stability over expansion. This decision did not signal weakness. It reflected foresight and discipline, qualities that made Hadrian one of the most effective emperors. One of his most enduring legacies is Hadrian's Wall in Britain, a monumental fortification cutting across the northern frontier. Stretching over 70 miles, it was both a defensive barrier and a powerful symbol of Rome's presence at the edge of the known world. The wall controlled movement, deterred invasions, and projected Rome's strength even to its distant provinces. It showed that Hadrian's vision of power was not about endless conquest, but about securing the empire so it could endure for centuries. His policy of fortification extended elsewhere as well, as he strengthened frontiers in Europe, North Africa, and the East, ensuring Rome's defenses were firm and lasting. Hadrian was also a traveler, spending more of his reign outside Rome than any emperor before him. He personally inspected provinces, oversaw construction projects, and ensured the legions remained disciplined. This direct involvement gave him a unique bond with both soldiers and civilians, reinforcing the sense that the emperor was not distant but present, active, and invested in the empire's daily life. His journeys left behind a trail of building works from aqueducts to theaters that improved both security and culture in the provinces. Culturally, Hadrian embraced Greek traditions, earning him the reputation of a Hellenophile. He patronized the arts, philosophy, and architecture, helping to spread Greek culture more deeply into Roman life. The Pantheon in Rome, rebuilt under his reign, still stands as one of the greatest architectural achievements of antiquity. Its vast dome and open oculus reflect not only engineering mastery, but also Hadrian's desire to create monuments that blended functionality with beauty. In this sense, his strength was not simply defensive but creative, ensuring Rome's cultural identity remained as formidable as its military power. Hadrian's reign was not without difficulty. He faced revolts, most notably the Bar Kokhba revolt in Judea, a fierce rebellion that tested Rome's authority. Though costly, his forces eventually suppressed it, further proving his commitment to maintaining imperial unity. His methods were harsh, but they ensured Rome's dominance remained intact. By the time of his death in 138 CE, Hadrian had redefined what it meant to be a strong emperor. His power did not come from adding new lands, but from preserving what Rome already possessed. He was a ruler who understood that true strength sometimes lies not in expansion, but in endurance, balance, and preparation. His vision ensured that the empire would not crumble under the weight of its own size, but would instead remain steady, fortified, and resilient for the generations that followed. Constantine the Great was a man who understood that power was never secure unless it could be reshaped to fit the world's shifting tides. When he rose to prominence in the early 4th century, Rome was divided, its strength fractured between competing emperors. Civil war had become the norm, and stability seemed like a fading memory. Constantine seized this turbulent world and made it his own, carving out dominance not only with the sword but with vision that would forever change Rome's identity. His path to absolute rule was carved through battles against rivals who each claimed the throne. The most decisive of these was the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 CE. Before the fight, Constantine was said to have seen a vision in the sky, a cross accompanied by the words, "In this sign, conquer." Interpreting this as divine guidance, he adopted the Christian symbol, marking his shields with it, and marched into battle. His victory over Maxentius that day was more than a military triumph. It was a turning point in the empire's spiritual and cultural direction. For the first time, Christianity was openly tied to imperial power. After consolidating his rule, Constantine made sweeping changes that strengthened his grip on the empire. He restructured the army, creating mobile field units that could respond swiftly to threats across vast territories. He reorganized the government, ensuring tighter control from the center, while also fighting corruption and inefficiency that had weakened earlier administrations. His reforms gave Rome fresh durability in an age of challenges. Perhaps his most enduring act of foresight was the founding of a new capital, Constantinople. Built on the site of Byzantium, it was strategically positioned between Europe and Asia, commanding key trade routes and providing natural defenses. The city was designed to rival Rome itself, adorned with palaces, forums, and churches, and it quickly became the empire's beating heart in the east. By shifting power away from old Rome and toward this new center, Constantine laid the foundation for an empire that would endure 1,000 years after the western half collapsed. Constantine's embrace of Christianity was both pragmatic and transformative. While he did not abolish Rome's old gods, his Edict of Milan in 313 CE legalized Christianity and allowed it to flourish. By intertwining imperial authority with Christian faith, he ensured that Rome's identity would evolve, rather than fracture under the weight of change. In doing so, he gave the empire a unifying force that transcended borders and centuries. When Constantine died in 337 CE, he left behind an empire reshaped in nearly every dimension: political, military, cultural, and spiritual. His reign was not without ruthlessness. He eliminated rivals and at times even members of his own family to secure his throne, yet his strength lay in vision as much as in force. He was not only a conqueror of men, but a recreator of empire. By marrying the power of Rome to the enduring faith of Christianity, and by shifting the empire's center of gravity eastward, Constantine ensured his place as one of history's most transformative Caesars. Marcus Aurelius ruled in a time when Rome faced unrelenting crises, and it was in these struggles that his true strength emerged. Unlike emperors who sought fame through conquest or glory through wealth, Marcus became a figure of endurance, a man who bore the empire's burdens with a quiet, unshakable resolve. He did not inherit an easy world. When he took the throne in 161 CE, Rome's borders were threatened by constant invasions, and the empire was soon struck by the Antonine Plague, a devastating epidemic that killed millions and weakened both armies and civilians alike. In such times, lesser rulers might have broken. Marcus did not. Alongside his adoptive brother Lucius Verus, he first confronted threats in the east where Parthia challenged Rome's dominance. Victories there secured the frontier, but soon after, disaster returned to Europe. Germanic tribes and other northern peoples pressed hard against the empire's defenses, pouring across the Danube in waves of invasion. Marcus spent much of his reign not in the luxury of palaces, but in military camps along the frontier, sharing the hardships of his soldiers. He was not a distant emperor. He endured cold winters, scarcity of food, and the constant uncertainty of war beside the legions. This closeness to his men built loyalty and gave them strength, even in the darkest campaigns. His strength, however, was not only military. Marcus was a philosopher, a man deeply shaped by Stoic thought. While leading armies and managing crises, he wrote down reflections that later became known as meditations. In these writings, he reminded himself of the fleeting nature of power, the duty of endurance, and the importance of reason in the face of suffering. These thoughts were not abstract. They were forged in the realities of war and disease, written by a man who carried the weight of empire yet sought to remain steady within himself. His philosophy was his fortress, a discipline of the mind that allowed him to face chaos without losing clarity. Despite relentless challenges, Marcus never abandoned his responsibility to preserve Rome. He strengthened defenses along the Danube, reorganized provinces, and ensured that the empire did not collapse under the weight of simultaneous threats. His leadership preserved Rome's stability at a moment when collapse was a real possibility. Yet his reign was not marked by expansion or monumental building projects. Instead, it was defined by survival and resilience, qualities often harder to achieve than conquest. His personal life was scarred by loss. Many of his children died young, and his only surviving son Commodus proved unworthy of the legacy Marcus had built. Knowing the flaws of his heir weighed heavily on him, but Marcus still upheld his duty until the end. He died in 180 CE, exhausted from years of hardship, leaving Rome secure but vulnerable under the rule of his son. Marcus Aurelius' strength lay in his endurance. He proved that power was not only about victories and monuments, but about standing firm when the world seemed determined to break you. His reign is remembered not for expansion, but for resilience, and through his words and example, he showed that the greatest fortress an emperor could possess was the strength of his own character. From Julius Caesar's raw ambition to Marcus Aurelius's quiet endurance, each emperor revealed a different face of strength. Some built their power on conquest, others on strategy, and a few on vision that reshaped Rome's very soul. Together they show us that strength cannot be measured by battles alone. It lives in survival, in discipline, in the ability to create order from chaos. Rome endured because of these men, flawed yet unshakable, who carried the weight of empire on their shoulders. Their legacies remind us that true power is never one shape. It can be the sword, the law, the wall, or the will to endure when everything else falters.